I want you to do something right now. Look around wherever you are, on your desk, in your bag, in your pocket. I'd bet there's at least one BIC product within arm's reach of you. A pen, a lighter, a razor, maybe of all three. And here's what's strange about that. BIC doesn't make the best pen in the world. They don't make the best lighter. They don't make the best razor. There are better options for all three. And yet, BIC is a billion-dollar company, globally recognized, dominant in three completely separate markets simultaneously. How does a company that openly admits it, makes cheap, disposable products, become one of the most powerful brands on the planet? That's exactly what we're breaking down today. Because this isn't just a story about pens. This is a story about one of the most underrated business strategies in modern corporate history. A French company that figured out a formula and then ran that same formula 3 times in a row against the same competitor and won every single time. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how BIC did it and why it's almost impossible to replicate. Stay with me, because the rival in this story is going to surprise you. First, where does the name BIC even come from? Marcel Bic, French entrepreneur, born 1914. A man so committed to his brand that he literally named his company after himself, then dropped the H so Americans wouldn't mispronounce it. That's the kind of details-obsessed, slightly controlling founder energy that built this company. In the 1940s, Bic was working as a production manager for an ink company outside Paris. He left, started his own operation making parts for fountain pens, and then in 1949, he designed something that changed everything: a cheaper, better ballpoint pen. That was the beginning. But the real story, the one nobody tells properly, isn't about the pen itself. It's about what happened when BIC tried to sell it in America, and who was waiting for them when they got there. Here's something most people don't know about BIC. Their entire rise to dominance is essentially one long rivalry with a single company: Gillette. Yes, the razor company. But in the 1950s, Gillette wasn't just in razors. They were quietly building a consumer goods empire, and the first place they collided with BIC was in the most unlikely of battlegrounds: the pen aisle. See, when BIC tried to break into the American market in the early 1950s, they had a problem. Their pen was 29 cents, which sounds like an advantage. And it was, everywhere except America. Because in America, cheap pens had a reputation, a bad one. The lower-end ballpoints on the market were notorious for leaking, skipping, and generally being a disaster. So when BIC showed up with their 29-cent pen, American consumers didn't think great deal. They thought sketchy, and there was already one established brand of affordable ballpoints that people actually trusted: the Papermate, selling for 98 cents, owned by Gillette. BIC was cheaper, BIC was better, and nobody cared. So BIC did something that was either genius or completely insane. They bought a pen company, not just any pen company, the Waterman Pen Company, one of the oldest, most respected pen brands in America, founded in 1884 by Lewis Waterman, an insurance salesman who had a pen leak on him during the signing of a major contract, lost the deal, and decided to spend the rest of his life making sure that never happened to anyone again. By the time BIC came around, Waterman was struggling. The rise of ballpoints was killing their fountain pen business, so BIC picked them up for just $1 million. And here's the genius part. BIC didn't want Waterman's technology. They didn't want their factories. They didn't even want their products. They wanted their name. They rebranded as the Waterman-By Corporation, launched their pen with the slogan, "Writes first time, every time," a direct shot at every leaky, unreliable, cheap pen that came before them. And it worked. The trust consumers had built with Waterman over decades transferred directly onto BIC's product overnight. Papermate never saw it coming. By the 1960s, BIC had taken over. They shut down Waterman's original fountain pen operations. They never cared about those anyway. And by 1971, the BIC name was powerful enough to stand on its own. They dropped Waterman from the company name entirely, sold the rights back to a French division, and moved on. Round 1, BIC. But here's what makes this story so interesting. Gillette didn't learn their lesson. They kept the Papermate brand alive, kept pushing, and a few years later, they'd buy that same French Waterman company Bic just sold off. Then they'd buy Parker Pen for over $500 million. Gillette was doubling down on pens, even as BIC was already moving on to something else entirely, because BIC had just found their next market, and Gillette was already there too. At this point, BIC had a formula, and they knew it. Find a market dominated by expensive or unreliable products. Build a cheaper, better version. Use smart branding to overcome skepticism. Destroy the competition. Rinse, repeat. And in 1973, they spotted their next target, the disposable lighter. Now, here's where the story gets almost poetic, because waiting for them on the other side of that market, Gillette again. Let's back up slightly. In the early 1960s, a French luxury company called St. DuPont created the first ever disposable lighter. They called it the Cricket, a French luxury brand, making a cheap disposable product. The irony writes itself, but it worked. The Cricket caught on, and in 1970, you probably see where this is going. Gillette bought the entire company. By 1972, Gillette had introduced the Cricket lighter into the American market. They had a full year head start, a whole year of brand building, distribution deals, consumer trust, before BIC even entered the picture. And then, BIC entered the picture. By 1978, just 5 years after entering the market, BIC had overtaken the Cricket to become the #1 disposable lighter brand in the United States. 5 years, against a competitor with a year's head start and the full backing of one of the most powerful consumer goods companies on the planet. By 1984, Gillette gave up entirely. They sold off the Cricket brand. At that point, the disposable lighter market in the US was worth $325 million. They controlled 55% of it. Cricket had 16%. Round 2, BIC. Here's what made the razor war different from everything before it. With pens, Gillette was a newcomer. They'd bought Paper-Mate a few years earlier. It wasn't their core identity. With lighters, same thing. The Cricket was an acquisition, a side project. But razors were Gillette. They'd been making them for over 70 years. Their entire brand, their entire reputation, their entire business model was built around one simple idea. Men need to shave, and Gillette makes the best tools to do it. This wasn't a side project BIC was threatening. This was everything, and Gillette knew it. So for the first time, Gillette actually moved first. When BIC started selling disposable razors in Europe in 1975, Gillette saw it coming. They rushed their own disposable razor to the American market before BIC could get there. They called it good news, a head start. Here's the thing about Gillette's business model that made disposable razors an existential threat. Their profits didn't come from razors. They came from razor blades. The handles were almost a loss leader, cheap, sometimes free. The real money was in the replacement blades that consumers kept buying month after month, a recurring revenue machine that accounted for 71% of Gillette's total profits. Disposable razors destroyed that model entirely. No recurring blade purchases, just a low-margin product sold at volume. By the end of the 1970s, disposable razors had captured 20% of the entire razor market, and BIC and Gillette were essentially equal competitors in that space. Equal, despite Gillette having a head start, 7 decades of brand trust, and the home turf advantage. Round 3, BIC. 3 markets, 3 battles, 3 wins, against the same company every single time. At this point, BIC had something very few companies in history have ever had: a repeatable system for building market dominance. Find a market, undercut it, brand it brilliantly, beat Gillette. So here's what the BIC story actually teaches us. It's not a story about pens, or lighters, or razors. It's a story about what happens when a company finds one idea, one genuine competitive advantage, and commits to it completely. BIC's idea was simple: make it cheap, make it work, make it impossible to ignore. That idea conquered 3 markets and built a billion-dollar empire. But that same idea had a ceiling. The moment they stepped outside the boundaries of what cheap and disposable meant to consumers, the formula collapsed instantly. And that's the paradox at the heart of BIC's story. The thing that made them great was exactly the thing that limited them. They were the best in the world at being good enough, and in the right markets, the ones where good enough is all anyone needs. That's more powerful than being the best. Think about that next time you pick up a BIC pen. You're not holding a premium product. You're holding the result of one of the most disciplined brand strategies in corporate history.